Chapter 35, Secretary He Part. The entire sequence of Zhang Yingying's totally non-standard way of speaking caused Chen Xiaolin to be dumbstruck. Her mind was weighed down heavily now. She really wasn't suited to respond to Zhang Yingying's sort of character, who was quick-witted 100 times over. Fortunately, another elevator had just arrived at this time, and the high-ranking members of the Mutual Assistance Group were the first to enter. Chen Xiaolin was pulling Zhu Lei over there, but there was a moment when she didn't pull him, and the two were just a bit stunned. Luo Nan led Zhang Yingying to shift a few steps and bumped into Zhu Lei lightly while moving. Only then did the stiff atmosphere break and dissipate. The party of people had already entered the elevator, but the mood inside the elevator was just as one could imagine. The only person who wasn't affected was Zhang Yingying. She pulled Luo Nan to the very back of the spacious elevator, drawing intimately close to him. Her upraised head blocked the sights of the others. "Come, come, come, lower your head." How could Luo Nan let her be so coy? Right when he was furrowing his brows, Zhang Yingying performed a quick action, gripping his earlobes tightly. She stuffed something into his ears, and soon a detailed static sound started up. "What's this? Internal earbuds." "The examiner, the exam problem." "Fine then. Actually, this toy is called the Hexuia, but the name isn't important and its functions aren't important. What's important is that it is the exam evaluation for entering the society. The problem could be easy, but it could also be very difficult." Zhang Yingying's hand lowered, then raised, letting Luo Nan understand that his answer to this exam problem would decide his place within the professional society. "Oh, you guys are going to the 27th floor. There's even a party. You're not focused, kid. Then let's set the end time for the examination to be the moment when we get to your destination. Best of luck then." "What the hell? Are you doing things spontaneously with no plans at all?" It was very difficult for Luo Nan to remain calm and collected. He saw that the elevator floor indicator had already reached the 15th floor. The elevator moved unhindered for some damned reason. It didn't stop anywhere on the way up. At most, he would have 10 seconds before he would reach his destination. How could Luo Nan have the time to think deeply? At this very moment, a trembling cry came from the mental plane. The heavily chained crow, which was most worthy of his faith, pierced out of his forehead and scanned the foreign object in his ear. The heavily chained crow was undoubtedly the most successful accomplishment from Luo Nan's self-formatting. It embodied his ultimate strength. Ability users should be relatively sensitive to the Wraith sign, since it was derived from the Burning Wraith and the Darksider life form. Luo Nan instinctively wanted to avoid contact between the two, so he didn't use the furthest most end of the chains. Meanwhile, the external neuron maintained a charged-up and idle state and was ready for access at any moment. The first impression he got from this Hexuia was that it was a set of internal earbuds, like a special electronic product. If he wouldn't get an ideal outcome from the exam, he would even cheat to change it. Luo Nan had to strive for a position within this professional society no matter what, for this represented his future path. His thoughts and decisions coursed using an instant's effort. The heavily chained crow cut through the Hexuia and used its limited resolution to sense an approximate analysis of the internal composition of this little thing. Sure enough, it was a precision electronic product. The highly integrated components made Luo Nan be completely dumbstruck as an electronics newbie. But then, a sort of marvelous response was fed back from the slicing chains in a flash. Luo Nan's mind and will naturally concentrated on it. The detailed static in his ear was blocked off, and there was only this response that formed a series of electronic signals. He excited the relevant areas of his nervous system and passed the valid information through into a form that was comprehensible by people. Oh, this form looks quite familiar. Before Luo Nan could react, a gentle artificial voice had already spoken out in his ear. Number 5357. Welcome to Xia City's Wilderness Explorers branch. At the same time, a translucent region opened up onto Luo Nan's retinas, and a concise visual interface emerged. Upon it was the traditional interface of a forum, and it showed that his registration was already approved. He just needed to fill out the relevant information. This sort of virtual interface wasn't unfamiliar to Luo Nan. Many companies used this holofilm product, and they all had this capability. 2 hours ago, he had used the external receiving neuron to a similar effect and experience. This also took in telepathic inputs. For an instant, Luo Nan nearly believed that the external neuron was no longer under his control. But soon he confirmed that the external neuron was still maintaining its original state. The hexia was just using a similar method to send and convert electronic signals to his brain. Yes, it was extremely similar. Luo Nan reached out with his hand to support himself against the ice-cold metal wall. The beating of his heart was rapidly escalating in frequency. This was certainly a brand new clue. It was related to the external neuron. It was a relevant clue towards that coward. He should have realized it sooner, should have realized that his grandpa's and that coward's research should have crossed paths with ability users. My God, his decision to enter the professional society was absolutely correct. A low electronic beep indicated that the elevator had reached the 27th floor. The other people all headed out. However, Zhang Yingying's whole face was covered with suspicion as she glared at him next to him. Don't say that you don't feel a single thing at all. If you're going to be this disappointing, I'll just immediately kick you off this floor. Luo Nan wasn't willing to let Zhang Yingying see his numerous and chaotic feelings. He lowered his head in a concealing nature and walked directly outside. Zhang Yingying followed him out of the elevator. She spoke in shock. It can't be, it doesn't make sense. My judgment can't be wrong. This female was way too annoying with her buzzing. Luo Nan's fuzzy thoughts were made completely into a mess. There were already the words, "Welcome to the society," and so on. He obviously wouldn't believe that he had failed the examination. He made a general sweep over the fill-in boxes of the interface. It probably used that vague method of using telepathy to enter in the data. Most of the boxes were pull-down menus. All he had to do was select his choice. Aside from basic information like his age and gender, the vast majority of the boxes were stuff he never came across before, like the ability source and class box. There were 2 options. One was gifted class. Another was systematic class. The F***CK is this. Luo Nan opened his mouth in annoyance. Am I a gifted class or a systematic class? Obviously you're a gifted class, Gak. Luo Nan acted telepathically, setting in his choice. He still didn't understand, though. What's the difference between the gifted class and the systematic class? The gifted class possesses a certain innate and special ability. The systematic class relies on an existing training system to go through arduous tempering and practice. Zhang Yingying's words were somewhat open-ended. But before she could finish talking, Luo Nan completely overthrew her previous judgment. I'm a systematic class. What a joke. If he had chosen the gifted class, the dozens of years of his grandpa's research and his 5 years of hardship, wouldn't it have all been negated? He acted telepathically again, and he changed his selection in the box. But his neck suddenly tightened before he could ask his next question. Zhang Yingying was actually firmly strangling him in place from behind. Her vigorous body had drawn and stuck close to him, making him suddenly go dizzy. You can see the interface, right? You're filling it in now, right? You haven't awakened, right? This is heaven-defying for a precision slanted, mentally enhanced. Luo Nan very nearly passed out from being choked by Zhang Yingying. His brain was already a pile of mush. Chapter 35, Secretary He Part 2-2. Zhang Yingying was causing a scene without regarding the location. Obviously, she would draw people's eyes. The people ahead who had already stepped into the dinner venue included Xiaolin, and they turned around one after another. They couldn't clearly hear what Zhang Yingying was saying, but they naturally went mute when they saw this scene. Luo Nan was being choked by Zhang Yingying. He couldn't perform any movements at all. Zhang Yingying gave a sly smile to the people ahead and waved her hand, while reining in Luo Nan to a corner. Xiaolin and the others could only assume that these two had some secret couple business to talk about. They glanced at each other and entered the venue with shaking heads. On the contrary, this interruption had actually continued to alleviate the tense atmosphere between Chen Xiaolin and Xiaolin. Those two looked away and started another conversation. Let go. To be reined in by the neck by a girl, to be forcefully abducted, and to not even be able to have the strength to retaliate back at all, caused Luo Nan to receive serious harm to his ego. He was really angry. Sure, Zhang Yingying were naturally familiar with each other. But from his perspective, Zhang Yingying and him clearly weren't at that level of familiarity. Perhaps Zhang Yingying could feel his mood, but more likely it was because of her own emotional state of mind calming down. Zhang Yingying let go with her arms by herself, returning back to her laughing and giggling self. She pressed against Luo Nan's chest while Luo Nan was fuming. I was worried that you hadn't understood the situation yet. Are you sure you came here to participate in this cold dinner party? Luo Nan was speechless for a time, and the anger in his heart was increasing without end. He took a deep breath. Then why did you even follow me up to the 27th floor? Because I needed to make a decision. Zhang Yingying was confident in her actions. If you didn't have any reaction at all to the hexia, my decision would have been to kick you down a floor to avoid losing a person. Luo Nan sneered. I responded to it, so now you decided to choke me. That was just an accident caused by being overexcited. Guys shouldn't be small, or something. I was also just happy for you, Tilda. After all, for an unawakened ability candidate such as yourself to be able to access the hexia and enter the psychic wave network, it is really rarely seen. Psychic wave network. Luo Nan couldn't avoid having his attention deviating to a different topic. Frankly speaking, Zhang Yingying's fussing appearance gave him some idea. Zhang Yingying responded with a question. What do you think the hexia is? A special electronic device. Bingo, the hexia is a telepathic device created by President Yueyin of our branch. Don't make fun of it. Our big-shot president is bad at naming things. Zhang Yingying promoted this person once again, with laughs and giggles. I won't explain the concept to you. I'll let you personally chat with the big-shot president on the way back. All you need to understand is that the hexia is a special communications device. It has a total of 6 levels of communications, the most simple of which is the radio. It's a unidirectional psychic wave transmission. As long as you're an ability user or have the gift to become an ability user, you will be able to receive this special psychic wave. So you count as meeting the requirement. Luo Nan thought about the gentle artificial voice. So it was that, welcome to the society. MHM, oh right, you should have a number. What did you get? 5357. Okay, wait for me to add you as a friend. Zhang Yingying suddenly stopped as another idea appeared in the blink of an eye. How about you add me? Get familiar with the interface. My number is 6166. Oh, by the way, the following two communications levels are the video and computing levels. The video is still a unidirectional signal transmission. It tests the mental response and abilities of the ability user. I call it channeling. Since you are a precision slanted, mentally enhanced, you should have dominance in this aspect. And at the computing level, you can achieve interactive functions between man and machine. Though the pre-established special frequency band of the society, you can mutually communicate as network navigators. You need some capability of mentally meddling with reality in order to reach this level. This is generally a privilege for the awakened. Anyway, you're a psychic, or perhaps you have a gift, so it's okay. I'm not a gifted class. Luo Nan emphasized once again, caring quite a bit about this aspect. He was certain that without his breakthrough in formating, without the formation of the heavily chained crow, he absolutely wouldn't be that sort of psychic. Maybe he wasn't a psychic at all. Zhang Yingying spread out her hand. Okay, tilde up to you. Though if you don't add me as a friend, I'm going to doubt that you have the ability in the first place. Luo Nan's face went cold. He followed Zhang Yingying's words and tried to add her as a friend, but there was a challenge in front of his eyes. Profile. Who in the world fills out that trifling profile thing? What if you attract the bad attention of some fellow? Wouldn't that be the same as sending your neck onto someone else's blade? Zhang Yingying had a disdainful expression. She incited Luo Nan once more. Just skip it, okay? Come on. Use telepathy to control it. Try adding me as a friend. Relax. Hexia's obscure computational capabilities are extremely strong. All you need is to have the ability, think of whatever, and it will be fine. Wow. While Zhang Yingying was exclaiming in astonishment, Luo Nan saw the translucent interface change with a variation in front of his eyes. It displayed, "You have added 6166 as a friend." Then a fuzzy squirrel leapt out. It even bowed towards him with clasped paws. To the other side, Zhang Yingying puffed out with laughter. My God, you used your student photo. How foolish. You're acting cute by using a squirrel. The word stupid is written all over it. Luo Nan responded sarcastically, but he also discovered that there didn't seem to be much difference between this device and communication software products on the market. He tried to change his own display, and soon the relevant modifying interface popped up. He thought for a bit, and he uploaded his visualization diagram. The tetrahedron, its inscribed sphere, and its outer scribed sphere rotated within the pitch-black void. It contained a hint of mysticism and profoundness. Luo Nan never took the visualized diagram to be something that was a secret to never be proclaimed. On the contrary, he wished to reveal this to as many people as possible. He wished to proclaim this diagram, along with other various related theories of his grandfather. There was just one thing. Luo Nan still understood very little of the marvels within. He absolutely wasn't qualified to preach about it. But as long as he got the chance, he would be very willing to let more people to have a deeper understanding of this diagram. Having become Luo Nan's friend, Zhang Yingying was naturally the first to see this change. She muttered, "Old perfectionist," and didn't speak any further. Luo Nan was still mulling over the deeper levels of the hexagram. After all, Zhang Yingying had said that there were 6 levels of use to it in total. She had only explained 3 of them. What were the later 3? But then an indicator sounded out before he could ask in detail. A friend request popped up on the retina interface. He had just entered the network. How could someone add him as a friend? He swept his gaze to the number that was indicated to be 5156. Obviously, who would be able to tell any information from this? He could only ask Zhang Yingying. Who's 5156? 5156. Zhang Yingying blinked her eyes, seemingly checking on her own hexagram. In the end, she donned an appearance of sudden realization. The society matched a secretary for you. The society has always treated its members very well. Ha ha. It would be a wonder to believe you. Luo Nan gave Zhang Yingying a glance, but in the end, he still added 5156 as a friend. Soon the other side sent a new request. The wartime encrypted communications made one quite speechless. He couldn't help giving Zhang Yingying another glance, as he felt skeptical of what this girl was concealing. But in the end, he still put the call through. He accepted the request, and a cold and sharp voice was transmitted to his ear. It was a female voice that wasn't the least bit sloppy at all. "Mr. Luo, I am Yueyin, your temporary secretary arranged by the society. What floor are you on, sir? I will go welcome you, sir." "Sir." Luo Nan still had not recovered from his shock when this secretary he continued. "Please share your geographical coordinates at the same time, sir, for easy contact during wartime." Over. Had she returned to the Third War era? Chapter 36, Encounter Battle, Part 1-2. Wrong, there was something wrong with this atmosphere. Luo Nan understood his own position very clearly. Even if he had leaped out of the circle of conventional society and entered into the special domain of the Wilderness Explorers Society, he was nothing inherently more than a bitter, job-seeking staff member. So far, he still wasn't familiar with his work environment, and so he obviously didn't have an appropriate position. But now you're saying that I even have a secretary. Luo Nan glared fixed at Zhang Yingying. This woman, who appeared to have an innocent expression, absolutely knew for sure the entire causes and effects behind this. Zhang Yingying's face was as pure as a white lotus flower. "Has your secretary made any arrangements?" Luo Nan's mouth twitched. "What did you all arrange before? Isn't it to have me experience this in the elevator? The examination has ended now. Can I go home?" "Don't go tilde, the entrance examination has ended, but there's still more advanced testing. The society has already opened a room on the 81st floor. He. We will receive you properly. All you need to do is be engrossed in drawing, and it will be fine." Drawing? Luo Nan gradually gained a better understanding in his line of thinking. He gave a cold glare. "You want to evaluate my psychic abilities. This is different than what you told me." Zhang Yingying had an innocent expression. "Yeah, tilde, I told you before. It's best not to expose matters involving psychic abilities. First get familiar with your situation inside the society. Then, when your ability truly awakens, it's fine to take your abilities out later. Otherwise, there will be a lot of people coming to annoy you, and you won't be able to refuse all of them. You're bound to offend someone, am I right?" Luo Nan continued to glare at her. Zhang Yingying spread her hand. "The problem is that my words are damn useless. The big shot has already spoken. The situation has changed. What else can I do? Originally, I was prepared to come here to give you more of an explanation, but then you were able to see the interface, and you also possessed the ability of telepathic control. So then let me ask you to switch over to the homepage announcement region. Luo Nan followed Zhang Yingying's instructions, and the translucent interface on his retinas underwent a change. It was eye-catching to the extreme. The rusted color of the earth contained the cracks, like the waves of the sea, that continued to spread down to the furthest abyss. The scene was boundless and limitless. You should already see the interface of the homepage. It's the wilderness, right? There's a bulletin board on the side of the road. It's right on there. What third-rate game interface was this? Luo Nan loaded the information from the board while cursing silently. Not even half a second passed before a flood of words, such as Darksider species, Human-Faced Arachnid, and virus, entered and interweaved to form a fuzzy, cold, and dark screen that appeared before his eyes. With a single swipe, a cold trace of sweat trickled down Luo Nan's spine. Look, do I need to say more? Right now, there's a war between us and those infected by the Darksider species. The government, the military, the society, and Quantum Corporation are sparing no price at all towards the search and destroy operation that is unfolding in the entire city. They have to bring this large-scale epidemic completely under control. Zhang Yingying's finger tapped on Luo Nan's chest, one strike after another. Her expression was one that was quite rarely seen. She was no longer smiling. My attitude towards this is very serious. The society's attitude towards this is also very serious. Every single ability user, no matter how experienced or how much of a beginner, has to contribute their strength to give aid in these concerning and dangerous situations. In addition, Mr. Luo, who has just entered the society, is a psychic. Right now, in regards to the society, you are what we need the most valuable of resources. Luo Nan muttered, the most valuable. Of course. Do you know how many psychics there are in the society right now? Even though our Xia City branch has over 1,000 people, we only have 4 psychics. And one of them is adventuring in the wilderness right now. It's impossible for that one to get back in such short notice. So there's 3 left. Grandfather, you looks to be approaching 100 in years. It would be too inhuman to make him run about day and night, so he can only act as a central overseer. Then separated into the west side of the city and the east side of the city are Old Gao and Old Bai. I don't know how much they're slaving away right now. Then you discovered a new slave. Luo Nan mocked her to conceal the nervousness in his heart. He counted as one infected by the virus in a certain sense. But the Darksider species that invaded his body had been vanquished by the power of his format, the heavily chained crow. But the problem was that this vanquishing was not a total elimination. The burning wraith had turned into the wraith sign and still maintains its instincts. It was still able to consume its species and strengthen itself. God knows if the ability users would take him to be as one of the infected with his state, an enemy that had to be slaughtered. But even though Luo Nan was nervous, he also possessed a certain excitement that was inexplicable. Human-Faced Arachnid. This sort of special existence was able to expand the vastness and depth of Luo Nan's knowledge towards the burning wraith. It allowed him to look down from a much higher level and see the entire course of events for the situation. He had a completely new idea of what he would do in the future. The human-faced arachnid had laid down a giant net over the city. He was originally a node within this net, but now there had been a change. Looking at the society's information, the purpose of this undergoing collection net was to ultimately reconstruct the human-faced arachnid, the most prominent and treacherous devil of the Darksider species, into a complete and peak state. This could start at any of the other nodes, but currently he was suppressing the Wraith sign using his format. From this perspective, if his node was the one to make it to the very end, wouldn't that mean he would completely seize the terrifying strength of the human-faced arachnid? Wasn't this the extraordinary strength that he had been chasing after all this time? It would be a strength seized by his format. Maybe this was exactly where the marvels of the grandfather's research lay. Hello, what are you thinking? You're not scared, stupid, right? Luo Nan came to from his distraction, but he didn't respond immediately. Zhang Yingying then patted him on the shoulder. Don't be scared, Tilda. Being scared is normal. The fact that you didn't cry and scream for mommy already makes me quite gratified. Relax. We just want to borrow your fantastical drawing ability, and you will absolutely be protected. Look, you have me right now. Then the society arranged a special duty secretary for you. It's Yueyin. She's a monster that was evaluated to be rank C+ when she entered the society. Hick. A genius. Her strength is high without limit. Luo Nan concealed a laugh. The opponent is the Darksider species. Doesn't that mean only psychics are useful? What are you thinking? On the real battlefield, any one of the standard awakened has a means to lock onto the Darksider life form. They just have different methods of doing so. Quite a few are even able to see them with the naked eye. Zhang Yingying solemnly corrected Luo Nan's absurd and ridiculous line of thinking. The real problem is as such. When the Darksider species lies in its hidden state, only psychics are able to discover clues about them. The society will rely on your ability to do precisely this. Who would send you to the front lines? Really? Luo Nan grew even more nervous. It seemed that he was closer to an awakened than a psychic. He also detected the Darksider life form through intuition. The most he could do was rely on the Wraith sign for a reaction while being in close proximity. As for being a psychic, he had just drawn the picture based off of what he had seen when he had fooled Zhang Yingying that one time. Besides that, he did demonstrate what could be psychic capabilities during the events with Li Cheng. But that was because the burning wraith had already formed on Li Cheng's body. It was a mutual response between wraiths. That kind of situation was seriously different than the long-distance sensing of a psychic. What to do? Luo Nan wanted to pick up his notebook right now and practice some more to avoid being made a fool of when the time comes. In reality, he really did take out his notebook. He had opened the drawing software of the flexible e-ink screen. Chapter 36, Battle Encounter, Part 2-2. Zhang Yingying laughed as soon as she saw what Luo Nan was doing, polishing your weapon right before the battle. Well, it's better late than never. Do you really take this to be an exam? Luo Nan's head didn't rise. Someone told me that I'm a psychic, but I never admitted to being one before. Right now I'm being treated quite decently, so I'm going to draw a picture and try to get a feel for it. If by any chance I'm really... You're mentioning by any chance to me. Zhang Yingying saw that Luo Nan wasn't preparing his weapon for battle. He was simply preparing to flee the battlefield. Her almond eyes went wide at once, and she grabbed him by his collar. You were able to draw my white rainbow, and there's also that bizarre sketch of a prison. How can you not be a psychic? Okay, I'm a psychic. Luo Nan's gaze still remained on the drawing software. He drew a little bit of something, but actually his mind was in turmoil with no order whatsoever. Zhang Yingying was still clamoring by his ear right now, so he simply had nothing to lose. You were the one who explained the concept that I was a psychic. You were the one who said it, and I have already taken the benefits provided by the society. In any case, it will absolutely be Sis Yingying who will foot the bill in the end. Luo Nan's unprecedented way of addressing Zhang Yingying so intimately made Zhang Yingying sick to her stomach. It's hard to handle a kid who's using reverse psychology. Zhang Yingying's eyeballs spun, and the hand that gripped Luo Nan by the collar somewhat loosened. Anyway, this C-plus rank secretary bodyguard is at most for one night okay. This request is still within my limits. If you want to enjoy this kind of special treatment for a long time, then you need to draw out some strength. That's right. I think you said before that you need some inspiration or something. How about we stimulate some a bit early tilde Acumen College's large community has high levels of service. Within the mutual competition of shamelessness, Luo Nan was finally defeated by Zhang Yingying's ample experience. He pursed his lips and uttered not a word. He drew out completely meaningless lines on the drawing software with a distraught and anxious heart. When all was said and done, he really cared about the preferential treatment he was receiving from this professional society. This was a high point that he had never imagined to obtain, and this was also an opportunity that had dropped from the heavens. He didn't want to let this opportunity slip from his fingers. He had to produce something. Luo Nan tried to recollect to the morning of today, to the practice that was the most similar to being a psychic. But that dreamlike state was really far too mysterious and otherworldly. In his current circumstances, with his skittish and anxious mind, it was really hard to completely bring that state back. Zhang Yingying drew her face closer and saw the plastered lines on the flexible screen. The more she looked, the more suspicious she becomes. Hey, you're going to make a mockery of yourself. Don't drag me down with you. Some people walked past Luo Nan, while he was disinclined to pay attention to Zhang Yingying. Those people felt somewhat familiar. Luo Nan raised his head to look, and saw that it was none other than Zhu Lei and Chen Xiaolin. The two did not have good expressions on their faces. The issue of the exchange from before clearly had not been resolved. There was an air of depression between these two, and right now they were walking towards the elevator. It was unknown what they were up to. Obviously, it would be hard to greet them under these circumstances. Luo Nan could only pretend that he didn't see them. He drew out 2 strokes with a lowered head, and he actually inexplicably drew out the twisted lines of the wraith sign. He completed it from start to finish in a single breath. He had never drawn it this efficiently before. Only when the sign finished forming did Luo Nan wake back to consciousness. His thoughts were slightly palpitating, as he was scared of what Zhang Yingying would infer from the sketch. He raised his head and shot a glance, but was actually met with a rarely seen sight of this woman who had disregarded his chaotic lines with at first glance, be somewhat stunned. You feel something. Luo Nan was just about to respond when he suddenly went mute. The abrupt drawing of the wraith sign would inevitably give off an ominous implication. He followed his instincts completely in the next moment, turning his head. Zhu Lei and Chen Xiaolin had both entered the elevator. The internal lighting of the elevator illuminated down, but it was unable to brighten the gloomy faces of these two. Luo Nan felt that a dispute would probably break out at any moment, to explode out between these two. And at this very moment, Luo Nan had a bizarre thought flash in his mind. It was the information he had checked up on this recent morning, coming from the Secret Star forums. It was the event where a suspected psychosis breakout had occurred, leading to a human tragedy. The wife had slaughtered the husband, and before this had happened, the husband and wife both had experienced a nightmare. Warning, warning, warning. The Secret Star forums had marked it with large black letters, and these letters floated out of the sea of his mind in the same fashion. Luo Nan closed his notebook with a bang, turning and moving his body towards the elevator. He shouted loudly at the same time, "Xiaolin!" This large shout was absolutely made impulsively. When this shout had left his mouth, even Luo Nan found it hard to proceed. He didn't know how to explain things. But it was right in the next moment that a trembling rang forth from the mental plane. The heavily chained crow called with a vibrating and earnest cry. And most importantly, the wraith sign at very front end of the chains lit up with a dark red glow. Luo Nan's consciousness was pounding mentally, but what immediately floated to his mind was an absolute loss on what to do. This was because there were two responses from the wraith sign that was clearly coming from two completely different directions. One was right in front, the other was right in back. Luo Nan could see the one in front absolutely clearly. Right when Xiaolin was looking at Luo Nan baffled, an apparition that was quite like the burning wraith became visible. Half of the demonic body was submerged in Xiaolin's back shoulder. It was unknown whether the body was coming out or continuing to permeate inside. Reality and the illusionary had intertwined. A human body and an apparition were fused into a weird scene. It caused one's scalp to go numb just looking at it. And right behind him, "Careful!" Zhang Yingying's shriek and an acute air-lacerating hiss rang out at the same time. The elevator door was already closing at this moment, and Luo Nan clearly saw, on the reflection of the smooth metal elevator door, a warped shadow that was just about to touch him. A bloody glow exploded from the shadow's shoulder, and a spurt of blood dripped onto the side of Luo Nan's face and neck. And at the same time, Luo Nan's back shook severely. It seemed like someone had crashed into him, pushing him forward to fall. Only the force was too much. Luo Nan's feet couldn't even touch the ground the entire time. He soared up high, heading directly towards the elevator door that had yet to close completely. He was approaching the elevator door at rapid speed, and the space between the door was shrinking little by little. Then Luo Nan had a rough understanding what was going on. He was probably going to be used as a tool to block the door from closing. The elevator door opened up on two sides in the next moment. A silhouette staggered to the side, crashing into the corner of the elevator. It was Chen Xiaolin. As for Xiaolin, with his large stature that was half integrated with the wraith, he blocked the front of the door with an expression of anger that was straightforward and even a bit juvenile. He was like a furious King Kong. His thick palm reached for Luo Nan's face. Perhaps it was because the change was sudden, but negative feelings didn't have time to surface in his mind. Luo Nan felt rather tranquil right now. In the blink of an eye, Xiaolin's hand had reached past his ear and grabbed onto his shoulder. Xiaolin pressed down lightly, ending Luo Nan's air-floating state in an instant. Luo Nan couldn't help but tumble and fall to the corner of the elevator, in the same direction as Chen Xiaolin. His field of vision spun as he tumbled. But the heavily chained crow, which had spurred the wraith sign, already mapped the entire surrounding environment of the elevator into his brain. A howl entered his ears at the same time. Xiaolin had already collided together with the dark silhouette that had thrown itself into the elevator. It looked like Zhu Lei wanted to knock that person out of the elevator. But his opponent's charge was far too strong. Zhu Lei's imposing body was unexpectedly unable to resist it, and he fell completely backward, smashing heavily into the back of the elevator. From what Luo Nan could sense, it seemed like the entire building was rocking. Chapter 37, Close Combat Part. The elevator shook quite fiercely, and perhaps it was the intense vibrations that caused the malfunction in the electrical circuits. The entire elevator suddenly dropped before the door could completely close, falling a full half a story. Zhang Yingying rushed up from behind, nearly getting sandwiched inside the crack of the closing door. Fortunately, she was able to pull the brakes in time and was able to escape from this disaster. But when she saw the tightly sealed entrance, she kicked out in agitation. The elevator soon came to a halt. This type of maglev elevator was suspended within a magnetic passageway. If the elevator were to wobble and exceed its safety limits, the automatic locking mechanism would activate to fix the elevator in place. This also meant that, within a short instant, the elevator had become a completely sealed space. There were 4 people inside. Luo Nan and Chen Xiaolin didn't have physical combat strength, and Zhu Lei and his opponent were wrestling against each other. What would determine their fates would be what was on Zhu Lei's and his opponent's bodies. Zhu Lei's face was flushed red. In front of him was a male wearing a black Western suit. The male was smaller than Zhu Lei by an entire factor, but the strength that the male displayed far exceeded what Zhu Lei could produce. His internal organs felt like they were rolling all over, having received a firm frontal assault. He found breathing to be hard for a few seconds. What was even more damning was the distinctly lacerated flesh above his opponent's shoulder. It was a serious wound that was to the bone, but Zhu Lei's opponent didn't reveal anything particular in his expression. His expression was actually indifferent, causing one's mind to shiver. And the injury did not seem to affect the strength output of this male at all. The 2 people were pushing against each other with their pair of arms right now. Their legs were spread into the floor. The 2 were completely entangled with each other. Zhu Lei was just about to use a wrestling throw, but right when he strove to start his movement, he saw his opponent open his mouth wide. A dense row of white teeth was exposed as the male directly bit towards Zhu Lei's throat. Zhu Lei snorted. He relied on his tall stature to send his head smashing down. His forehead collided with his opponent's face, blocking the hissing, beast-like bite. It would be reasonable to say that Zhu Lei's decision was brave and correct. The strike landed on a dominant location, but although the opponent was clearly bleeding from the nose, it was as if the injury didn't matter. On the other hand, Zhu Lei went dizzy for a moment, and in the end, this affected his ability to exert strength. His feet floated slightly, and he knew something was going wrong. His opponent was using brute force to uproot Zhu Lei's entire body from the ground. Then Zhu Lei saw the world spin as he fell heavily to the metal floor with a bang. He practically felt like he was going to vomit up his heart and lungs at this moment. But Zhu Lei's many years of arduous training displayed its utility today. The moment Zhu Lei lost his balance, he twisted his legs seemingly by instinct to ultimately cause his opponent to stumble. He borrowed the gap between them to pull back to an inconceivable degree with his imposing and buff body. He then shot out once more, throwing his body precisely onto his opponent. Zhu Lei seized the chance to give another skull bash, but this time his head went from down to up, striking his opponent in the chest. Two series of impacts later, Xiaolin and his opponent fell back at the same time to collide into the inner metal wall of the elevator. Xiaolin's grasp of direction was quite decent and was worthy of being rejoiced over. He had pushed his opponent to the opposite direction of Luo Nan and Chen Xiaolin. His body was slightly slanted to protect the two people who lacked combat ability. Could he finally catch a breath yet? Xiaolin's chest undulated violently. For some unknown reason, the state of his body was pretty bad today. He had used up a severe amount of physical power, and the dangerous hand-to-hand combat just now had nearly depleted all his strength. Could it be that he was too anxious? Xiaolin couldn't understand his own situation, and the opponent in front of him didn't immediately launch an attack. Instead, this male cast a freely unfocused, bizarre gaze in this direction. He simply looked like a lunatic. "Have you all gone mad?" Chen Xiaolin, who was in the corner, had finally somewhat came to from the series of incidents until now. Everything that happened before her eyes had already exceeded her common sense. She knew that her boyfriend was quite good at fighting, but she had never encountered him not resolving things with words. There was absolutely no reason to be in this life or death fight. This Luo Nan, who they had just became acquainted with today, was mixed into this. It looked like he was on their side. Or in other words, maybe it was because of this fellow that this fearsome maniac was inexplicably drawn here. But what she couldn't stand the most was the "it's only natural that things are this way" expression on their faces. What the hell was going on? Chen Xiaolin struggled to get up. She broke away from the dimension of logic as the feelings of terror and absurdity mixed together. It made her instinctively wish to escape from this area, to escape from these people. But this was impossible to do within this completely sealed elevator. She could only shout herself hoarse. "Can you guys stop and talk it out? We're all trapped here right now." "Shut up." The short shout came from two people's mouths at the same time. Xiaolin and Luo Nan had spoken in unison. The shout stopped Chen Xiaolin, who had no idea about the current situation, from performing irrational actions. After shouting, Xiaolin locked his complete attention onto the opponent in front of him once more. Luo Nan added a few words. "Senior, please calm down for a moment, okay?" He turned his head over upon speaking, meeting Chen Xiaolin in all directions. Chen Xiaolin was stunned for a bit, being locked fixed by Luo Nan's mottled and otherworldly eyes. It was as if all the strength in her body was sapped instantaneously into the air. She leaned against the corner of the elevator, her brain a sheet of nothingness. Luo Nan had used hypnosis to temporarily control Chen Xiaolin. He then raised his head to look towards the forward section of the elevator. Xiaolin's attention was on the formidable opponent ahead of himself, but Luo Nan's attention was on a more bizarre plane. There had been a burning wraith struggling inside Xiaolin's body, but it had already burrowed its way out during the fight just now, seizing away a sizable amount of Xiaolin's life force. And at the same time, that ferocious black-suited male also had a burning wraith leap out of his body. The two burning wraiths intertwined, and before Luo Nan could react, they fused together to strengthen in a flash. This sort of variation was really outside of Luo Nan's scope of reactions. Luo Nan wanted to resolve this problem. The heavily chained crow had already been released, and the wraith sign was flickering. But this time they didn't embody the same dominance, like smashing rotten wood, that they had several times before. They were even conservative and cautious. This was because the just fused burning wraith in the elevator was the most powerful burning wraith Luo Nan had ever seen. Even the one Luo Nan had once controlled, the one that turned everything on its head on the military transport ship, seemed to be inferior to this burning wraith. The form of this demonic body even cast off the formless mass of the void. It was approaching closer to the form of the very initial human-faced arachnid of the R&D district. From the materials coming from Quantum Corporation, Luo Nan could confirm one step further that the main body of the burning wraith was indeed like a hybrid between man and spider. More precisely speaking, a giant spider was stuck to the back of a human body, looking to be fused halfway. Both beings shared the same head, an ugly and demonic head. The apparition floated in the air. In fact, it was still absorbing Xiaolin's and the black-suited male's strength in an unending stream through an unknown and secretive method. Xiaolin's symptoms of being tired were actually due to this. His opponent was pretty much the same. From the responses of the Wraith sign, Luo Nan was able to hypothesize a few things on a deeper level. To manifest itself in this form, this burning wraith must have consumed at least over a dozen of its species. In other words, the pure quantity of accumulation made it stronger than Luo Nan's wraith sign by severalfold. Luo Nan thought back to his ideas of going hunting that had existed not too long ago and was inevitably forced lament over his own naivety. At this rate, he would be the one consumed. Chapter 37, Close Combat, Part 2-2. Luo Nan gazed, dead-fixed, onto the burning wraith in the elevator, and the burning wraith's attention deviated over accordingly. In a certain sense, they were looking face to face at each other. 6 demonic eyes lit, aflame at the location of the burning wraith's head. They were lined up into 2 parallel columns. They really were like the eyes of an arachnid. Each eye had a different color. The 6 colors were as follows: muddy yellow, crimson red, shallow gray, deep sea green, deathly white, and jet black. Each eye was extremely small, but the colors swapped amongst the eyes. It was demonically bizarre, and it made one feel dizzy. Just sweeping his gaze over made Luo Nan have several turbid and chaotic thoughts boil out from the bottom of his mind. A surge of impatience swept his entire mood. He itched to smash something in order to vent out his emotions. Luckily, the heavily chained crow's trembling cry swept over him. These inexplicably surging emotions and distracting thoughts were quelled completely. The burning wraith's demonic eyes were flickering and fluctuating. Clearly, it had noticed Luo Nan's heavily chained crow, and of course, the flickering wraith sign at the front most part of the chains. In Luo Nan's eyes, the first action this burning wraith was performing was to adopt an assault posture. It was the exact same response as the same species of burning wraith from this morning at the school's medical department. Luo Nan also adopted a defensive posture, preparing to meet it head-on. But this burning wraith actually didn't throw itself over. Instead, it even retreated a few paces to draw out some distance between it and Luo Nan. Its blurry face continued to look slightly up, and it cried out with a sound that ordinary people would find hard to detect, but the sharp hiss surged on the mental plane. A sudden thought emerged in Luo Nan's mind. A thought of the terrifying roar from yesterday on the warship came to mind in nearly an instant. He didn't have time to think further. The heavily chained crow was buzzing with its cry as it pierced the air to directly assault the burning wraith. But compared to the giant surging wave of yesterday's mental assault, the momentum of this roar was far quicker. By the time the heavily chained crow touched the burning wraith, Chen Xiaolin had already shrieked behind him, bursting out with feelings of terror. Her body collided with the wall of the elevator as she wished to forcefully escape. But she didn't have the chance nor the choice at all, so her body went stiff with bulging eyes of terror. And from her body soared a bloody red beam of light. The beam was cast directly towards the burning wraith. As soon as the bloody beam had split out of her body, she instantly felt drained and she passed out. Luo Nan seriously wasn't able to block this sort of incorporeal exchange. He had his hands full relying on the quelling of the heavily chained crow to be able to stabilize his mind and the boiling of his life force. The chains that streaked across the air were affected as well. It lost its unstoppable force from before. It reached a standstill outside the perimeter of the burning wraith, trembling intently. At this point in time, the effects of the terrifying roar were far from over. The black-suited male, who was evidently under the control of the burning wraith, let out a fleeting howl. He faced Zhu Lei and threw himself into another assault. Zhu Lei was clearly influenced by Chen Xiaolin's shriek. His body trembled, and he even lost the key moment to exert strength. But he didn't take it lying down. He did the utmost with his remaining energy and exerted force to collide head-on with a low snarl. The two met again in force against force, fiercely clashing with each other. This time Zhu Lei only fell back half a step. He had hit with a fist and also even an elbow. It seemed like he hadn't lost his steam for the time being. Luo Nan was unable to feel delighted from this. This was because he could already see that the intense fighting and surging of emotions were the best catalyst for the burning wraith. It caused the life force of the two to transform into the bloody beams of light that flowed endlessly into the burning wraith floating in the air. Yesterday's method was like a low-heat slow boiling of spore emission. Compare this to the current method of blood drawing and life force sucking. Wasn't this 10 times more tyrannical? The strength that the burning wraith possessed to interfere with reality already exceeded Luo Nan's imagination. Luo Nan suspected that if the burning wraith, which only existed as an apparition of the void on the mental plane, were to continue to absorb life force like this, it would be completely capable of turning nothingness into reality and appear on the material plane. But what made him be on alert the most was the burning wraith's calm behavior. The burning wraith was actually controlling its instinct to consume. It didn't throw itself directly at Luo Nan. Instead, it was first increasing its own strength to the greatest degree possible, to increase its odds of success. This could already be said to be an intelligent decision. This monster was heading uninterrupted into becoming whole again. Indeed, to continue using the name given by Quantum Corporation, Human-Faced Arachnid, would be most suitable. It was a savage and cunning hunter. All methods it used were to strengthen itself or to weaken its prey. This made it hard to imagine just how powerful its completed form would be. Luo Nan knew that the situation was growing far from good. Aided by the offerings from Zhu Lei and the black-suited male, the total strength that Human-Faced Arachnid wielded was increasing like a boat on a rising tide. Luo Nan's heavily chained crow continued to try to penetrate the outer perimeter of the formless demonic body, and the wraith sign at the very front continued to do the utmost to consume all the energy it could. But there was a faint layer that they could not surpass. A few attempts of penetrating, of interfering, yet the human-faced arachnid's core remained imposing and unmoving. And moreover, it continued to strengthen endlessly amidst all this. This human-faced arachnid took most of this energy to strengthen itself, When this strengthening would come to an end, who knows just how terrifying the following attack would be. As for Luo Nan himself, it seemed as if he had reached his limits. Similar chaotic thoughts had flashed in his mind. Then they dispersed completely. In reality, there was one more move he could do. Luo Nan stopped looking at the human-faced arachnid, closing his eyes. He forced himself to enter his fixed space. He had relied on the fortune of the past 2 days of difficulties, of tempering, to make considerable progress in his mental space. With the effort of a mere sudden flash of thought, the visualized diagram of the tetrahedron with its inscribed sphere and outer scribed sphere emerged in the void. The heavily chained crow had come out of the central region of the diagram and was extending forth to try to penetrate into the deeper layers of the human-faced arachnid. But no matter what it did, it couldn't bridge that gap. It was far from reaching the overpowering might it had displayed when it had vanquished the very first burning wraith, the power that smashed everything as if it were rotten wood. At first, Luo Nan believed that this was due to the power of the human-faced arachnid. But now he had a different thought. Maybe the problem laid with himself. What was his own state when the heavily chained crow had displayed its most powerful strength? There was only one answer: out-of-body state. The sort of penetrating and clear feeling over everything unseen and substantial had never appeared again after his out-of-body experience. Luo Nan didn't understand the reasoning behind this, but there was a threat placed ahead of him right now. He didn't have time to ponder over this. Drastic times called for drastic measures. He had to do the impossible, come hell or high water. The out-of-body experience was a strange experience for Luo Nan. The first time he was able to come out of his body was due to siege hammer of the burning wraith, and then the pulling of the heavily chained crow. He had to do something along those lines in order for him to have an out-of-body experience this time around. He performed the relevant telepathic thoughts to pass commands to the wraith sign using the heavily chained crow. A fantastical vibrational response was fed back, washing over his entire body. Luo Nan's senses were much clearer this time around, and he clearly touched upon the incorporeal veil. He didn't have the strength to puncture it, but he pulled in an external force to deliver an attack from both inside and outside. A hole was split open in this veil. He was no longer bound to his body, so he floated up. Luo Nan still had his eyes closed, but his senses on the mental plane were unleashed completely. And at this moment, he welcomed the 6 incomparably bizarre-gazing eyes of the human-faced arachnid via his soul-body state. The heavily chained crow crackled with its trembling cry, which seemed to have increased in detail and clarity. It was none other than this sort of subtle change that made Luo Nan instantly understand that his judgment was correct. The gap that he could not surpass to touch upon the human-faced arachnid was not related to his opponent at all. The most important cause laid exactly with his own fleshly body. He needed to carefully study this issue later in the future. The 6 eyes of the human-faced arachnid flickered before him, looking eager to eat. Perhaps it felt that it had accumulated enough strength, or perhaps the out-of-body state of Luo Nan looked to be much tastier and weaker. Luo Nan abandoned his remaining distracting thoughts and looked straight at the human-faced arachnid with no fear at all. Was it time to give it another shot? The battle could break out at any moment, but the safety hatch on the ceiling of the elevator exploded down in this instant. The blur of a human dropped at lightning speeds together with the safety hatch. The black-suited male had just made his way precisely to the halfway point of the elevator, and the hatch smashed over the top of his head. Chapter 38, Yueyin Part. The black-suited male, normally, had quite the reaction speed. He had displayed adept twisting and evading maneuvers even during the battle with Zhu Lei. The problem was that the elevator could only be so big. Zhu Lei was protecting Luo Nan and Chen Xiaolin behind him, taking up at least half the space and leaving very little room for the black-suited male. In the end, the male had to use his arm to block the hatch. A bang rang out. The metal hatch had smashed against the black-suited male's elbow. No trace of the gargantuan strength from before could be seen. The light metal match was pounded into deformity. The last-second use of strength, and a misslip at that, made it unavoidable for the black-suited male, no matter how swift and fierce he was, to sink into the stiffness of a corpse. Zhu Lei sneaked a peek and punched with a fist out of spite. But then he caught a change in front of his eyes. It seemed that there was another human figure behind the black-suited male. What followed was the crisp sound of bone shattering. Then the twisted body of the black-suited male was sent colliding over. Zhu Lei made an error in judging distance in the next moment, and he instinctively changed his fist into a palm in order to swat the black-suited male aside. But suddenly, a short body cut through the male. It was indeed bizarre. This person had cut their way between Zhu Lei and the black-suited male. Right when Zhu Lei had his arm pushing out, right when he was wide open, this opponent sent their palm up and smashed Zhu Lei in the jaw. The vibrational energy was transmitted to his brain, and Zhu Lei's body went paralyzed. He was unable to control his body no matter what he did. And right when he was struggling, a dagger had made its way to his neck. He couldn't hold on any longer, and his eyes went white as he fainted. The life-or-death battle had both parties defeated in a moment's instant. And this loss of consciousness severed the life-force transferring channel of the human-faced arachnid. Although things were done roughly, this was an expert that adopted full measures. Luo Nan's mind roused, for he immediately knew that reinforcements had arrived. The human-faced arachnid's rage was boundless. Its 6 demonic eyes suddenly lit up as it glimpsed to see who had just arrived. The ripples on the mental plane seemed to congeal with actual substance and came crashing down. It was none other than the siege hammer attack. Luo Nan's mind was screaming, "Not good," and he tried to use the heavily chained crow to interfere with the human-faced arachnid. This time the chains really did display a difference due to Luo Nan being in an out-of-body state, stabbing far deeper into the void. It seemed to practically touch the core of the human-faced arachnid, but it was still extremely difficult for immediate effects to appear. Then in the next moment, a red glow stormed forth in the elevator. Luo Nan had a certain urge to squint his eyes, and his soul body responded in this way. This was because a layer of raging flames had stormed out this new reinforcement's body right in front of him. The glow of flames was blazing, penetrating from inside out with its light. This siege hammer, which attacked directly against one's soul, wiped out half the sea of flames with a rumble, but it was ultimately unable to break through it completely. On the contrary, the raging flames dampened a little, and then expanded to explode with even more violence and power than before. It completely destroyed the attack on the mental plane, continuing to flood the entire elevator with the glow of flames. Its might was incomparable for a time. The format of fire. Luo Nan's couldn't help having his mind be in an upheaval. Soon he discovered that something was wrong. He was swept by the glowing flames, and the exact same state of 1,000 cuts of pain from yesterday reappeared on his soul body right now. But this time, the penetrating freezing chill had completely transformed into a scorching burn. So it turned out to be friendly fire. Luo Nan saw that the situation had turned for the worse. Any thoughts of waging a great battle in an out-of-body state were totally annihilated. But instead of going directly back inside his body, he fell back to hide behind his main body. He relied on the breathing of his main body to block this wave of calamity. A hissing came from within the elevator at this moment as well. The glow of an ice-cold blade covered the space to brightly contrast with the surging flames within the elevator. The blending of the two was marvelous. The raging flames and the cold blade were glaring. Their tracks were branded onto Luo Nan's consciousness. It took a long time for them to disperse. That blade looked to be quite familiar. The human-faced arachnid already felt pain by every means from being burned by the format of fire. And the aura of this blade made it even warier. It instinctively wanted to flee. But at this very moment, the heavily chained crow finally displayed its usage after a moment of adaptation. The chains suddenly crumbled and radiated a myriad of thin threads directly at the core of the human-faced arachnid. Although the force was a bit off from being completely overwhelming, it didn't matter what tricks the human-faced arachnid pulled. The crow was able to execute its interfering and inhibiting. To be able to slow the human-faced arachnid by a trace was already enough. The blade's aura tore through space, flashing onto the incorporeal image of the human-faced arachnid. It split a straight line through the body, scarring the human-faced arachnid before vanishing to nothing. The human-faced arachnid hissed once more, but this time it was a blood-curdling shriek. The shriek was unending. It had been so close to congealing a demonic body into reality, but it actually had been smashed apart into countless dark and deep rays of light. The light permeated through the elevator, scattering in all directions. It still had this move left. Luo Nan was extremely surprised. He could sense that the human-faced arachnid had not received a fatal injury. The reason why it crumbled and dispersed was for the sake of fleeing and nothing more. With this sort of decision-making, who would believe that this wasn't an intelligent being? The heavily chained crow withdrew, but Luo Nan felt something about the wraith sign in front. Amidst the chaos of the crumbling human-faced arachnid, the wraith sign had torn off a piece of it, completely devouring this piece in an instant. Luo Nan didn't try to understand the effects in detail. It was bad to Tari. His soul body leaped towards his physical body through the hole, and he opened his eyes. From this perspective, he just so happened to see the blade's harsh aura recede. Ultimately, it seemed to withdraw back into a sleeve. God knows how there was space to conceal a blade with those slim-fit tailored clothes. Luo Nan could not help but carefully size up this person. Hick looked a bit familiar from the back. This person. Luo Nan opened his mouth in order to speak, but he was suddenly hit with a spell of dizziness. His body leaned back to press against the wall of the elevator. The ice-cold metal was soon heated by the warmth of his body. Indeed, using this out-of-body trick was a really dangerous move. The price was especially high. If the soul body were to receive an attack, then the fleshly body would bear a portion of the damage in the end. Also, he had not eaten dinner yet. He was already very hungry. But now what was up with this so bursting feeling? Luo Nan slowly inhaled and exhaled, trying to relieve the endless and increasing feeling of swelling. But it was useless. The ate until bursting feeling came from the mental plane. It seemed that the wraith sign had forgotten to take into account the size of its stomach when it had swallowed the piece of the human-faced arachnid in one bite. It had become quite swollen from the human-faced arachnid's gift. This piece that was torn from the human-faced arachnid comprised of not only pure energy, but also a large quantity of information. The heavily chained crow had the inherent capability of analyzing information. But when faced with this enormous chaotic flood of information, its abilities were somewhat ineffective. Clearly, this information had exceeded Luo Nan's scope of understanding. What to do? Oh, perhaps he could. Luo Nan stirred telepathically, and the external receiving neuron, which was already buried within the flexible e-ink screen, responded to dock up with the heavily chained crow in an instant. It was as if a choke point had opened up. Luo Nan didn't care whether or not this enormous quantity of information was useful. He just stuffed it all in. His thought process was very simple. Up or down, just put it all in. The external neuron could control the several system modules of the laboratory simultaneously. It could control the sea of information that was in a supercomputer. There shouldn't be a problem for it to handle this remnant of the human-faced arachnid. Reality soon proved that his judgment was correct. Towards all information, external or internal, the external neuron took in whatever there was. There were no bad reactions whatsoever. The resolution of his mental senses was finite, and Luo Nan didn't know how the external neuron ultimately operated. He had the urge to open up the flexible screen to take a look. Then a hand reached out in front of him in the next second. Chapter 38, Yueyin Part 2-2. This hand that reached out towards him was slender and spotlessly white, but the contours of the cold and hard joints gave off a completely different charm. Luo Nan raised his head, setting his eyes on the seemingly familiar face. The face looked to be excessively cold, detached, and hard to deal with. Also, there were those slim-fit dress pants. They caused a great disparity with his memories of the weaving rays of a blade's aura from several dozen seconds ago. "You are Yueyin, Sir's temporary secretary. I'm very sorry, Mr. Luo. I came late." That's right, her last name was also He. Luo Nan eventually made a confirmation. Wasn't this the same white-collared female that was at the entrance to the pub? The one who Chen of the Mutual Assistance Group had shouted, "Sister He." Luo Nan had even acted as a bellboy for her. But now this sister, he had become his secretary. The rules and status of the world of ordinary people and the world of ability users ... It seemed that the difference was quite large, and it appeared that this was quite favorable for him. Yueyin's eyes were drooping slightly down at this moment, somewhat disagreeing with the cold and proud appearance within his memories. Only now did Luo Nan realize that her gaze was far too sharp. When she covered up this characteristic, intentionally or otherwise, what remained was only a peaceful impression and nothing more. And of course, she was extremely beautiful. Having this kind of secretary was really not bad. Tiny buds of vain thoughts sprouted in Luo Nan's mind and were immediately uprooted. Luo Nan had not forgotten about Zhang Yingying's introduction to the situation. This was most likely a special period due to the havoc wreaked by the human-faced arachnid. The value of psychics was reflected in this. If he were to take this to be in his right, then he would probably become the laughing-stock of the Wilderness Explorers Society and be forever engraved in memory. These thoughts operated in his mind for only a split second, and Yueyin's hand remained in front of him all the while. Luo Nan's brain operated for another cycle before he was able to react by gripping her hand with his own. When he felt Yueyin's hand, he found that it was indeed as cold and hard as illustrated by his sight. Several finger segments and joints had formed calluses. In comparison, Luo Nan's own hand was like the hand of a young master who had never gone through the baptism of wind and frost. It was excessively silky and soft. Yueyin exerted a bit of strength to bring the half-collapsed and half-leaning Luo Nan up. She withdrew her hand, yet supported him for a bit. It seemed that she was scared Luo Nan would collapse again. In reality, Luo Nan really wanted to tell her that he was just a bit hungry, a little bit swollen, and that there weren't any major problems with his body. But speaking in this way would be no different than uttering the words of a nutjob. He was on the verge of speaking his mind, but he switched topics and pointed to the unconscious Zhu Lei. "He's fine, right? He's my friend. It was him who saved me just now." Luo Nan was really worried that Yueyin would take Zhu Lei as an enemy to be eliminated. "He's just temporarily unconscious. His blood and energy will start flowing soon, and he will wake up naturally. This other miss is a bit more troublesome. She probably needs to be hospitalized and observed, and a mental hospital needs to be arranged. Wait a little bit." Yueyin stopped speaking as she pressed lightly against her ear. "She's probably using the hexia to communicate with somebody." Luo Nan did not feel like he was given the cold shoulder. He used precisely this opportunity to continue sizing up and evaluating his secretary. Yueyin's eyebrows were locked in place by habit while she was communicating. What was noteworthy was that Luo Nan had never seen her truly smile or relax. It seemed that she was dissatisfied towards everything, including herself. Perhaps the reason was from her rather prominent life experience, but she always gave off an enormous, oppressive feeling. Luo Nan was not unfamiliar with this kind of feeling. He was normally like this as well. He had exhausted nearly all his energy trying to reproduce the experiments from his grandfather's notebook. The complicated theory and high-level operating procedures made him doubt if his actions and works were perfect. He didn't know if he met the requirements of these experiments, so the pressure was always there. Naturally, it was very hard for him to be happy. The only thing was that Luo Nan didn't have a lot of life experience, so he was unable to form an oppressive air towards others. He could only display himself as introverted and depressing. For such a powerful woman to be constantly living life under pressure, this world was more difficult than he imagined. The feeling of sorrow was born inexplicably. Luo Nan shook his head. He didn't know why he had suddenly become a bit more depressed. But then a second later, he discovered that the floor beneath his foot seemed to still be vibrating. The elevator had already resumed a peaceful atmosphere. The vibration could only come from an external source. He asked instinctively, "Is there an earthquake?" "No, this is just the pointless venting of a failed operation." Yueyin actually responded, and then selected the 81st floor as the elevator button. The elevator vibrated slightly, then it restored to normal operation, slowly going up. Luo Nan mentioned a few words. "Zhang Yingying's still on the 27th floor. She's already been called up." Luo Nan blinked his eyes. He was already lost in regards to the society's plans and logic. Zhang Yingying was quite the unreliable woman, having said only a word or two. She was quite misleading. It didn't matter how he looked at things. Yueyin was much more conscientious than her. "Can you tell me just what the heck is going on now?" I remember that I just came here to participate in the evaluation to enter the society. Yueyin raised her brows while looking at him. Evaluation. Luo Nan sold Zhang Yingying out without the least bit of pressure. I just submitted my application to join the society this morning. Then Zhang Yingying told me to participate in an evaluation exam over here. I've already passed it. Then you guys told me about the havoc the human-faced arachnid is causing, and that the society really needs psychics, even arranging a secretary for me. The aforementioned should be correct, right? Yueyin responded with wrinkled brows. You only knew of the information pertaining to the human-faced arachnid when you came to the pub. What about the specific details about the operation? Details? Luo Nan was stunned before realizing that he had sold out Zhang Yingying completely. Well, that's good. In that split second, Luo Nan had a completely new affirmation towards Zhang Yingying's degree of reliability on the spectrum. In the end, Yueyin shook her head. There wouldn't be any point even if I do tell you the details. Everything is a chaotic mess. Was she talking about the society? Right when Luo Nan was trying to figure out this unfathomable mystery, Yueyin used her hexia to transmit him information. Please enter the encrypted channel. Adjust to warfare mode. Luo Nan acted telepathically according to her words. The translucent interface on his retina reopened. He discovered, at this time, a series of 7-8 blood red warnings in the wartime encrypted communications channel, all of which came from Yueyin. The time stamps were all around the time of the incident, and on the normal communications channel was additional information from Zhang Yingying. It was only that Luo Nan's complete attention was on the human-faced arachnid during that time. He had been completely unaware of the channel. Yueyin reminded him at this moment, Mr. Luo, pay as much attention as possible to the information provided by Hexia. It's best for all our future communication to be through this device. This is to ensure accuracy and efficiency. Yes, but it seemed that I had lost connection just then. Yueyin's eyebrows constricted a bit more. That's my negligence. Even though Mr. Luo is already capable of achieving third-level communications, in the end, you're not an awakened. It's hard for you to perform tasks simultaneously once you enter a tense situation. I hope that Mr. Luo will take a set amount of time to do emergency response training in order to avoid situations involving communications disconnections. Luo Nan didn't respond immediately, for the architectural drawings of Limestone Water Village pub had appeared on his retina in this moment. There was something eye-catching on it, a moving marker. Chapter 39, A New Way of Thinking Part. The Limestone Water Village pub was not an independent building. Even though it had a height of 454 meters with its 108 stories, it was only one of the buildings existing in the Cloud City Water Village complex. And moreover, it was the building with the lowest height. There were 6 buildings similar to the Limestone Water Village pub, distributed in a laddered ring. They increased in height in order, altogether surrounding the Cloud City main building, which towered at 1179 meters to form one of the world's top-ranking building complexes. The architectural designs that Luo Nan could see encompassed the entirety of Limestone Water Village pub and the several connected passageways to the next higher buildings' businesses. The transparent map was transformed into a mesh-like form, looking to be like honeycombs. But it was more complicated than this by 1,000 times. There were blue triangular flag cursors scattered all around, representing the Wilderness Explorers Society. They looked to be charging around in a maze. Seeing this scene, Luo Nan blurted out, "There are too few people." The 108-story limestone water village pub was the most affordable and in touch with people building among the Cloud City water village. Naturally, the popularity was always high. When it came to be the weekend, especially during the peak hours of the night, there were at least a dozen dinner parties lined up in a row. Counting the travelers and tourists, 20,000–30,000 people coming and going wouldn't be considered much at all. But the number of ability users scattered among the various floors didn't exceed 15, taking everything into account. One person would need to cover 7–8 floors on average. In reality, there were several teams formed, among which included these two who were present in the elevator right now. The amount of area they could barely cover was simply riddled with 1,000 holes. Luo Nan kept on hearing stuff about an operation, causing him to believe that the society would execute it on a large scale for the sake of hunting and destroying the human-faced arachnid. He believed that they would lay down an inescapable net. But when he saw this scene, even he felt a little bit embarrassed by it. His thoughts deviated at this time as he recalled a small detail. "I remember that sister you had brought along 4 people." In the end, Luo Nan found it embarrassing to call her by Secretary He. He copied this tongue from Chen. Those 4 should be congregated together. Luo Nan was already completely convinced. Wasn't this kind of deployment to hunt the human-faced arachnid the same as finding a needle in a haystack? Yueyin suddenly asked him at this time, "Can you switch to conference mode?" Luo Nan believed that she had other plans. Naturally, he didn't have a reason to refuse. Soon, the retina interface flashed with a notification as the wartime encrypted communications channel entered conference mode. A row of avatars appeared on the interface in order. All 15 society members at Limestone Water Village Pub were online, and Zhang Yingying's squirrel was among the avatars. But what happened next was most unexpected. The following words from Yueyin were clearly a response to his question. "The number of people isn't the crucial factor. After all, the hidden resources that are in the society's control are quite considerable. And so, the appropriate deployment to kill a clone of the human-faced arachnid would be 3 to 5 awakened acting together. This is more than enough, being the one to weaken the powerful human-faced arachnid into retreating." Yueyin was naturally qualified to speak these words. And Luo Nan didn't object. He wouldn't say it in this secret channel. He would wait until she was in front of a large crowd before asking, "Sister how did you come to this conclusion in the end?" Yueyin's voice was sharp and serious, but she had no intentions of stopping. "Since our numbers are few, we can't possibly cover everything. There is absolutely no need to scatter ourselves, especially in this case, where commanding a long-distance deployment will make a high level of refinement be unattainable." Shots fired. Right when Luo Nan was stunned and speechless, another person spoke intentionally, and their voice jumped out from the hexsphere. Wait. Things are different if a military arrives. Then how do we conduct things? How do we deploy? Secretary give me a proper explanation." An impatient mood penetrated through the oily voice. A flickering indicator of number 3393 appeared at the corner of the retina interface. The avatar was an ugly black beetle. Yueyin didn't get caught in the black beetle's rhythm. She just adjusted the building's design map and opened up an interface screen on the lower right corner to display a monitoring video of the interior of the pub. Luo Nan noticed that the faces of the people in the video consisted mostly of students. Looking at the scale and form, it was none other than the mutual assistance cold dinner party event, which he had yet to enter. Soon, Yueyin made a mark on the interface. A male and a female were engaged in conversation at the edge of the monitoring area. Xiaolin and Chen Xiaolin. The other was the male who they engaged in battle with, the black-suited male who was coming endlessly closer. Clearly, this was a recording from before the incident. Xiaolin's and Chen Xiaolin's dispute was able to be seen. They probably had some misgivings about the public setting. After a few quarreling words, they left the site. They probably wanted to find a more quiet place to talk. The black-suited male followed behind them the entire time. The video recording then switched over to the entrance of the elevator, capturing Luo Nan with his head down drawing at just the right time. Naturally, Zhang Yingying was captured as well, looking at him from the side. Please take notice of the position marker of every person present. Yueyin's cold and piercing voice sounded out. According to Zhang Yingying's description, as well as what was displayed in combat, Mr. Luo discovered the anomaly on his friend's body at this time. He yelled a warning, then he was taken by surprise by the Black Wolf. Black Wolf! Luo Nan changed his gaze to the black-suited male on the ground. So it turned out this guy had a nickname. Speaking of which, this fellow was in a much more miserable state than Xiaolin. Yueyin's attack just then had directly snapped his spine. Could he still be saved? But Yueyin's following explanation stunned Luo Nan. The Black Wolf was a registered member of the society and was also a member of this hunting operation. However, right now he is already a slave of the human-faced arachnid. Yueyin's tone was undisturbed, remaining unchanged even though this was her comrade. She displayed no further emotions as well. But there was a silence within the society's conference channel. This matter was clearly hard for the others to take in. Yueyin's analysis continued at this time. We weren't able to find the scene where the Black Wolf gets infected, but extrapolating from his last communications timestamp, he was infected approximately 20 minutes beforehand. Then the infected Black Wolf approached the next target. We have reason to believe, from the state of him focusing on the target, that he had already been bestowed with a command. He shadowed the target, waiting for an opportunity to harvest the fruits of battle. The human-faced arachnid's methods were cruel and fierce. There was practically no cushioning time in between. And at this time, we had no inkling of this whatsoever. Yueyin's voice was the only sound left in the temporary silence of the society's conference channel. It was only until Mr. Luo captured a trace of the human-faced arachnid and gave his friend a warning that we were able to start to mobilize. The first wave was the person by Mr. Luo's side, Zhang Yingying. A beep indicated that the elevator had just reached the 81st floor. There were no disturbances whatsoever during their entire trip. Thinking about it, this was probably the result of some special manipulation. The elevator door opened. Luo Nan was then stupefied. Right in front of him against the wall was a beautiful woman with an expression of lifelessness. Wasn't this Zhang Yingying? This young lady, who had always radiated with energy, was clearly receiving the information from the society's conference channel. She made a not-so-pleasant assessment after the premonition and raised her hand dispirited. Hi, I'm here. Chapter 39, A New Way of Thinking, Part 2-2. Aside from Zhang Yingying, the 4 experts brought by Yueyin were also present. They assumed action by taking out and placing down the three unconscious people from the elevator. Yueyin's footsteps did not end. She gestured with her hand for Luo Nan to enter the society-reserved conference room. Zhang Yingying was ignored, but she was exceptionally clever. She wordlessly followed at their sides after her greeting, accepting the analysis and criticism coming over the hexia. Anyway, Yueyin didn't criticize her completely negatively. Zhang Yingying's initial response was acceptable. The situation was sudden and unexpected, but she was still able to discover the anomaly with the black wolf and was even able to intervene. Her biggest problem is that her attack power isn't heavy enough. She wasn't able to stop the black wolf from going on to harm Mr. Luo. In reality, if Luo Nan's friend wasn't such a remarkable martial artist to be able to rely on his own powerful will and life force energy to cast off the human-faced arachnid's corruption, then Luo Nan absolutely wouldn't have been able to narrowly escape an attack from two sides. When Zhang Yingying heard this relevant assessment that contained some good points about her, Zhang Yingying's expression didn't actually improve. Instead, she turned more gloomy and was even a bit absent-minded. The group of people entered the conference room, which was completely empty right now aside from a few monitoring devices installed in a disarray. Yueyin did not give a single glance at them, and just asked Luo Nan to sit down so she could continue explaining the relevant issue. Since the conversation was conducted completely on the psychic wave network, the plane of reality was just a sheet of silence. The atmosphere continued to be very tense after everyone entered and sat in the room. The most unfortunate issue occurred during the second wave. First of all, Zhang Yingying's second reaction was very clumsy. She looked on helplessly while the elevator, which contained Mr. Luo, fell and dropped, and she wasn't able to perform any effective actions. In addition, she wasn't able to get to the elevator in time. Next, support of the operation completely fell apart. There was a total of 74 seconds when Mr. Luo was completely exposed to the threat with the black wolf and the human-faced arachnid, including the time when I was there. We should be rejoicing the fact that we are still able to analyze the circumstances surrounding Mr. Luo right now, that we're not paying funeral respects to him. But this result had nothing to do with the members of the operation. It was just as before, nobody spoke. Yueyin's analysis wasn't that exceptional, but it was formed from cold, hard facts of steel. She completely exposed the clumsy response of the society's operation team. Luo Nan saw number 3393, the black beetle who had spoken initially, disconnect and exit from the conference mode. It looks like that fellow was also quite prideful and rebellious. Yueyin's expression did not change in face of this. She continued, "In comparison to the issue with the operation I exposed, I am incapable of understanding the reasoning behind the plans arranged beforehand. I received the notification from the society only half an hour before the operation. I wasn't presented with a mission briefing. I was asked to act as secretary and a bodyguard for a member. It was only after I arrived at the pub that I saw Mr. Luo's basic profile. The crucial information was also unclear. According to my understanding, Mr. Luo was also completely ignorant of the details of the operation. Moreover, he's lacking in the appropriate training, so he made very non-professional actions when faced with this sudden development and ended up getting trapped in a dangerous situation. Everyone was focused on battle. The members of the operation didn't utilize their mental abilities at all in order to bring about effective commands. Moreover, the infected was placed as a higher priority. The human-faced arachnid's autonomous activity was neglected, leading to the utter failure of the mission. I discovered the aforementioned issues during the operation. Perhaps I have a misunderstanding somewhere about the inner details, since it hasn't been long since I retired from the military and entered the society. I apologize ahead of time once again. But for the exposed and future exposed issues, I hope everyone is able to engage in serious discussion to resolve this. Otherwise, our search and destroy against the human-faced arachnid can only lead to constant losses and lead to even more unpredictable consequences. Over. Yueyin's long explanation had finally come to an end. No one spoke for a long time in the conference channel, and there was nobody who responded to her proposal. It was an awkward atmosphere. Luo Nan even thought that if Yueyin hadn't softened her tone near the end, perhaps more people would have exited from the conference channel like the Black Beetle. He was able to see that Yueyin's rigorous and strict methods were a bit inharmonious with the society's atmosphere as a whole. Then Luo Nan thought of Zhang Yingying's assessment of ability users this morning. Some comments about being stuck up, untamable and unsubduable, eccentric and perverted. He could see from the present that this really wasn't an exaggeration. At least them being scattered around were words that absolutely hit the target in reality. Perhaps this operation will result in nothing. Beyond all expectations, Zhang Yingying spoke out within the conference channel at this time. Everybody, I've been humiliated to this degree. I'm not scared of speaking out. We still need tactics to hit this boss monster. Everyone came over here like a swarm of bees without direction. In reality, we've underestimated the enemy. Let's gather together as a team again. The words by Zhang Yingying were made dispirited in an everyone came here to eat a farewell dinner style. But the result was actually quite decent. The silent and frozen conference channel spilled with chaotic noise at once. Okay, let's discuss the battle tactics. It would also be good to meet each other. Mr. Luo still hasn't opened his mouth. Did his secretary turn him into a puppet? Oh, Vice President, today's fortune is tomorrow's disaster. Mr. Luo truly understands what it means to be wise and play things safe. Apparently, he's still quite young. I still haven't met our future Vice President. This beginning is far from good. To be able to draw from the success and experience of an ex-military is quite good. Apparently, Vice President plays the wilderness game. Does the military have a team in the wilderness game? The Vice President should be an expert. What character do you usually use? Luo Nan was left speechless. This was clearly a wilderness team who played the online game 10 days in the wilderness together. It was unknown who called out first to come over to deal with the human-faced arachnid. They probably thought they were in a game raiding a boss. Yueyin was expressionless when faced with this. She could only sit quietly and wait. Luo Nan looked at Zhang Yingying again. After she had finished speaking, she had leaned forward on the table. She continued being lifeless, then she felt Luo Nan's gaze and suddenly turned her head over. Hey, draw another portrait for me, okay? Heck. Forget it, you don't understand anything. Zhang Yingying buried her head in her arms so no one could see her, and she grew increasingly depressed. She knew that Yueyin's assessment of the entire situation was quite fair. But the more she knew this, the more she minded. It was only because of that sentence. Her attack power isn't heavy enough. Ever since she entered the society, A single attack of her white rainbow received praise from every big shot in the society, without exception. She was known to have the most powerful and explosive attack power among the awakened. She had always been quite proud because of this. But in reality, she absolutely didn't cause enough damage to the Black Wolf. If the Black Wolf had used a serious skill against Luo Nan at that time, talking about things right now would be useless. Zhang Yingying was somewhat absent-minded as she felt the cold and sharp air circulating around her body. She inexplicably thought of the words spoken by Susan this morning. "Has your white rainbow stunted?" This was the first time Zhang Yingying had similar thoughts sprout in her mind. It seemed that things were a bit different than what her boss said. That's a wrap for this installment. Thank you all for watching and supporting Lord of the Stories. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more amazing stories. You can also explore other series updated daily in our playlists. Have a fantastic day and see you in the next episode.